Let's do a study this morning. This is a passage of scripture that's familiar to virtually all Bible students. In Ephesians, the 6th chapter, Paul is saying, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might, for put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we wrestle not, or we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places." And he goes on to say, take up the whole armor of God, and gives us how we should be suited, or how we should walk in order to effectively stand against or battle these forces that are against us. But what we want to do is we want to just really look at, what is Paul talking about here? What is he talking about when he says rulers, when he says authorities, when he says cosmic powers? Well, let's look at it. Let's click on it. And as I've shown you before, how Logos Bible software works, let's just click on rulers and see what it brings up. It brings up an evil supernatural being. This is what the fact book says of this particular passage of scripture. An evil supernatural being. Okay, well, let's look at authorities. Authorities brings up, it doesn't change. It stays right there. An evil supernatural being. Cosmic powers, let's look at that. It stays the same. It doesn't change. An evil, spiritual, supernatural being over this present darkness, against spiritual forces. Let's click on that. It doesn't change. It stays exactly the same. An evil, supernatural being. So where is Paul getting this information from? How are we to understand these spiritual forces, these authorities, and these cosmic powers, and these spiritual forces in heavenly places? How are we to understand who they are, why they exist, or where they came from? I want to take us back to an Old Testament word. Many of us, and traditionally we've understood this word to be one of the names of the God that we serve, Yahweh. Let's look at the word Elohim. Okay. And we'll do a study of Elohim, and Elohim brings back a definition as a supernatural being. Its ontology is a supernatural being. It does not say that this is a name for Yahweh. It does say, however, that it is a supernatural being. And since we understand that God is a spirit, okay, he is a spiritual being. So that says to us that God, Yahweh, is an Elohim. So he is a spiritual being. But what we also want to understand is that there are other Elohim. There are other spiritual beings as well. That's why Paul is saying to us, we're wrestling not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces in heavenly places, authorities, cosmic powers. Why do we say that? Okay, let's look at the definition of the word Elohim again. All right, this word has several meanings in Scripture. It typically means God or gods, and also refers to Yahweh, the God of Israel. In other words, it tells us what Yahweh is, but not who Yahweh is. Okay. So let's look at another passage of Scripture in the Old Testament. Okay, and in Psalms 82 and 1. Let's go there. Psalms 82 and 1 says, God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. This first God, or this first word, capital G-O-D, God, we understand to be talking about Yahweh, God, the God of the Bible, God of heaven, all-powerful God, okay? Has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. In other words, it sounds as if he is seated or taking his place in the midst of other gods. Well, that's exactly what this scripture is saying. So when we look at this word here, God, capital G-O-D, it is Elohim in our Bible lexicon at the bottom. And when we go down to the sense of the word is the supernatural being who originated and rules over the universe, the object of ancient Israelite worship. Pay close attention to what it's saying. It's the supernatural being who originated and rules over the universe, the object of ancient Israelite worship, and also the God that we worship today. But let's look at this other word, gods, here. Okay, that same word is Elohim in our lexicon, Elohim. Okay, but when we look at the sense of the word, it simply means a deity, a supernatural being worshipped as controlling some part of the world or some aspect of life, or who is the personification of a force. So in other words, it's saying that this is not Yahweh, but it is a deity nonetheless. So we looked at the same word, Elohim, but we found out that Elohim means two different things, or it refers to two different entities or two different beings. We understand, or we found out that it refers to a deity, a supernatural being worshipped as controlling some part of the world or some aspect of life. We also found out that Elohim also means the God of Israel, the supernatural being who originated or created and rules over the universe. So the sense of a word is important to study in Scripture. We have the same word, but yet it's used in different ways. It's used in different senses throughout the Scriptures. So how do we determine the sense of a word, or how a word is used in Scripture, or how a word should be used in Scripture? Well, we simply go down to our biblical sense lexicon, and let's take, for instance, let's look at God, Elohim, God, and let's go down to the biblical sense lexicon and click on God, Israelite, and it brings up our biblical sense lexicon. Okay, and it gives us all of the possibilities of how that word can be used, or how that word can be interpreted through Scripture, supernatural entity. What we want to do is we want to just find all of the places in Scripture where that sense, or that particular sense of the word, is used. So what we'll do is we'll just go right here to search for the sense of the God who is the God of the Israelites, and we'll just click on that, and in our right window over to here, it brings up all of the scriptures where that particular sense of the word is used. So everywhere we find that sense of the word, we'll find that it's specifically talking about Yahweh, God, or God as Yahweh, God as that particular being who created all things, who created the heavens and the earth. So as we scroll down, we'll notice, for instance, and God said. We know that that's talking about Yahweh. And God saw, and God separated, God called, God said, God made, God called, so forth and so on. Okay, let's go back now to the other word, the other usage of Elohim, or God, or as a deity. Let's click on deity, and we see that it's a supernatural entity as well. So let's click on deity now. And when we click on deity, it's going to bring up a number of usages as well. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father. So it's saying in essence, or speaking of God in essence, as their God, who is an Elohim. But also, as we look further down, who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? So it differentiates the God of the Bible, or Yahweh, from other gods. So this Bible sense lexicon, it really helps us to understand the usage of a word, and where that word is, how that word is best understood in Scripture. But more importantly, what it does, it lets us know that the Elohim, or those Elohim, those small g gods, they are real beings, real active beings in our world and in our time.